done all that much before. Remember, GM had just built its wind tunnel in the early 1980s, and so it was really getting to learn more about aerodynamic shapes. Of course, you do have the skirted front fenders, as you see here, in addition to the skirted rear fenders. And as somebody at GM Design once told me, if you want to have a pretty far-out proposal, you skirt the rear wheels. If you want a radical proposal, you skirt the front and rear wheels, and that's what this has. Notice also that the Voyage has this canopy of glass. The doors are separate. The door glass is separate from the roof, but the roof is one continuous panel of glass, and there's structural bracing underneath it, and that glass goes all the way back. It's a gorgeous look, extremely hard to execute, I have to imagine, but it just looks stunning even all these years later. You can see that license plate. This is Cadillac Voyage there, and you get another view of the glass and the interior. I suppose the air conditioner would be working hard on this, kind of like an AMC Pacer. But notice the low belt line and how much visibility you have in this car, ability to see out. They don't make production cars like this anymore, much less concept cars. The visibility is all but gone. There are also no door handles in the Voyage. There are little buttons that you push on the B-pillar to open the doors. So it allows you to have this clean look associated with the exterior. Now, under hood, there was Cadillac's 4.5-liter V8 making 275 horsepower. It was souped up for the Voyage. It was going to have a V12, at least at one point in the conversation, but that was scrapped because of the timeline, and this 275 horsepower V8 was what was under hood, along with an all-wheel drive setup. And Cadillac claimed a top speed of 180 miles an hour when that 275 horsepower and all-wheel drive were coupled with that low coefficient of drag. Recall at this point that if you got the standard 4.5-liter throttle body injected V8 in a Cadillac, it was making 155 horsepower, I believe. And in the Elantes, it would make 200 horsepower when it was introduced. The Elante was making do at this point with a 4.1-liter 170 horsepower V8. So 275 was quite a bit. I suspect they could do that because they didn't have to meet emissions. Notice also the door glass here doesn't go all the way down because it just doesn't have the room. That glass is so big and has such curvature to it that it can't go all the way down in the front door. I'll also say that from the rear, that C-pillar does have a hint of 1995 Oldsmobile Aurora, even the backlight a little bit. And perhaps that's because the Aurora was based on a concept car called the Tube Car, which was being done at a similar time in GM design. The car just came out a long time after the concept. I will also say, notice that grille up front. That grille would be employed on Cadillacs to come in the early 90s, and in particular on the Fleetwood Brougham. But it was a different design, and that grille was much debated. Apparently, Jerry Brockstein, the chief designer, had to fly to the first auto show where the Voyage was being displayed with this grille in hand and replace the existing grille on the car because it was determined at the last minute that this one looked better. Now let's turn to the interior, and you can see the power window switches and power lock switches here. And I suppose they're functional because they're worn. It's not just a show car, and it has some functionality. Check out that turn signal stalk there on the steering wheel. You can also see the funky radio pod on the interior and very small air outlet vents. I do like how the IP wraps into the door panel and forms the door pull. That was cool. Here's the buttons for the 20-way power seats. The Voyage had power seats, also with a massage function. So the car was ahead of its time. It had 3-position memory seats, 20-way power seats, and a massage function on it. And those cool headrests, you haven't seen anything like that on a car. It's an interesting design, I will say. Don't know how to really describe it, kind of like mushrooms growing out of the top of the seat. The rear seat is a similar pattern. And, you know, the 1988 Buick Regal, I want to say, maybe it wasn't the 88 model year, but they ended up having a seat stitch pattern similar to that. Here you can see the roof with the structural pillar, but this one continuous piece of glass. An amazing look. There, the door glass you can see isn't all the way down. And some round gauges, kind of typical, but a cool theme nonetheless to the instrument panel. Here's a better close-up of the center console with those buttons for the 20-way power seats. You can see the gear shift. This car had a 4-speed automatic transmission. Nothing really all that special there. But there was a voice-activated hands-off phone that allowed you to talk to your friends without ever taking your hands off the wheel. And that was integrated into that center pod design, along with, you can see there, the radio and what appears to be some HVAC control. So very advanced for the time. Again, massaging seats. We'll call it Bluetooth, kind of. Bluetooth light, I guess, if you will. There was also a navigation system in the Voyage. And it even had a backup camera with a liquid crystal display, which is at the top section there of the instrument panel. So it had so many of these features that we now kind of take for granted today. But this was in 1988 on this concept car. The backup camera, the massaging seat functions, a very low coefficient of drag, 0.28 CD, very, very low, even by today's standards, certainly very low for the time. GPS navigation, 275 horsepower, which isn't a lot to write home about today, but 180 mile per hour top speed certainly is. And voice-activated phone. So a lot of features would make their way into